The polished porcelain teacup trembled in Juliet Bryce's hands as she served Lord Arlington Montclair, the Emperor's most trusted advisor. The grand palace of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in Vienna sparkled with gold leaf embellishments catching the morning light, making her squint. 3 months in service, and still she had not mastered the art of remaining invisible while attending to the aristocracy. "Girl," Lord Arlington said without looking up from his correspondence, "you've overfilled it again." Juliet flushed, noticing tea threatening to spill over the delicate rim. "Forgive me, my lord." Her voice, soft with the lilt of her rural upbringing, betrayed her common origins despite her efforts to smooth it into the refined tones expected in imperial service. "This is the 3rd time this week. Perhaps you're not suited to indoor work." His grey eyes finally lifted to her face, studying her with the detached curiosity one might show a peculiar insect. "Though the Countess Varga speaks well of your needlework." Juliet lowered her gaze, as was proper. "I endeavour to improve, my lord." Lord Arlington returned to his papers, seemingly forgetting her presence. At 35, he wore his authority with the ease of one born to it. His dark chestnut hair was immaculately styled, not a single strand daring to defy its proper place, much like the servants, aristocrats, and everyone else in the strictly ordered imperial world of 1908 Vienna. "You may go," he said after a prolonged silence. Juliet curtsied and backed away, nearly colliding with a gilded side table. As she closed the door, she glimpsed him reach into his waistcoat pocket, withdrawing a small item that caught the light, a ring, perhaps. But it wasn't her place to notice such things. In the narrow servants' corridor, she leaned against the wall, steadying her breathing. After her parents had died in the influenza outbreak that ravaged their village, she had been fortunate to secure a position at the palace through her mother's distant cousin, who served as under-housekeeper. But the intricate rules and rigid hierarchy of imperial service constantly threatened to overwhelm her. "You look as if you've seen a ghost," said Eliza, a kitchen maid with whom Juliet shared a cramped attic room. "Worse. I nearly spilled tea on Lord Arlington's correspondence." Eliza's eyes widened. "The Emperor's shadow himself? You're fortunate he didn't have you dismissed on the spot." She lowered her voice. "They say he never forgives even the smallest error." "He was unexpectedly patient," Juliet admitted, remembering his measured tone. "Patient?" Eliza snorted. "Lord Arlington Montclair doesn't know the meaning of the word. He once had a footman sent to the countryside estates for wearing improperly polished shoes. Perhaps he was in a charitable mood. More likely he was distracted. Haven't you heard the whispers? The Emperor has been pressing him to marry. Needs to secure the Imperial advisory line, they say." Eliza grinned. "Half the noble ladies in Vienna have their sights set on him." Juliet felt an inexplicable discomfort at this news. "It's hardly our business whom his lordship chooses to court." "Of course not. But it doesn't stop the entire downstairs from speculating." Eliza glanced up and down the corridor before continuing. "They say he carries his mother's ring, waiting for the right woman. 35 and never married, most unusual for a man of his position." Before Juliet could respond, Mrs. Hewitt, the head housekeeper, appeared at the end of the corridor. "Miss Bryce, are you planning to spend the day gossiping while the Countess's linens remain unattended?" "No, Mrs. Hewitt. I was just on my way." Juliet hurried away, pushing thoughts of Lord Arlington and his mysterious ring from her mind. That evening, Juliet was summoned to Lord Arlington's private study to collect linens for laundering, an unusual task for someone of her station. Normally, more senior staff would attend to the private chambers of someone as important as Lord Arlington. "Mrs. Hewitt sent me to collect your linens, my lord," she said, keeping her eyes downcast as she entered after his acknowledgement of her knock. Lord Arlington sat at his desk, surrounded by stacks of papers and leather-bound books. The room smelled of sandalwood and ink, with a hint of the tobacco he occasionally indulged in. "The linens are prepared," he said, gesturing toward a basket near the door without looking up. As Juliet moved to collect them, a gust of wind from the open window scattered several papers from his desk. Without thinking, she rushed forward to catch them before they could flutter to the floor. "I have it," Lord Arlington said sharply, reaching for the same papers. Their hands collided, and for an instant, their fingers touched. Juliet recoiled as if burned, but not before noticing the elegant handwriting on what appeared to be personal correspondence. A woman's handwriting. "Forgive me, my lord," she stammered, backing away. "I didn't mean to. It's of no consequence," he interrupted, though his tone suggested otherwise. He carefully gathered the papers, aligning their edges with unnecessary precision. "You may take the linens now." As Juliet retrieved the basket, she noticed a small leather-bound book that had fallen partially under the desk during the commotion. She hesitated, then bent to pick it up. "My lord, you've dropped. Leave it." His command was swift and unexpectedly sharp. She froze, the book halfway to the desk. "As you wish, my lord." Something in her voice, perhaps the hurt at his harshness, made Lord Arlington look up properly. For a moment, his aristocratic mask slipped, revealing something vulnerable in his expression. "I apologize, Miss Bryce, my lord." "Juliet Bryce." "Miss Bryce." He took the book from her hands, his fingers careful not to touch hers again. "Thank you. I've been preoccupied." "Of course, my lord." Juliet curtsied, sensing the dismissal in his words. As she turned to leave, Lord Arlington spoke again. "Miss Bryce, do you read?" The question startled her. It wasn't common for servants to be literate, though her father, a schoolmaster before illness had claimed his position, had ensured her education. "Yes, my lord. My father taught me." Lord Arlington nodded, a curious expression crossing his features. "Good. That's good." He seemed about to say more, but instead waved his hand in dismissal. "You may go." Later that week, Juliet was assigned to assist in cleaning Lord Arlington's private library, an honor typically reserved for more senior staff. The library was magnificent, with floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with leather-bound volumes in multiple languages. "Be careful with the books," Mrs. Hewitt instructed. "His lordship values his collection above all else. Nothing is to be opened or removed from its place." Juliet worked methodically, dusting the lower shelves while the senior housemaid attended to those requiring a ladder. She was almost finished when she noticed a slim volume partially hidden behind a larger set of books. It had fallen at an odd angle, as if hastily replaced. Carefully adjusting it, she couldn't help but notice the title, Collected Poems of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. The corner of a paper protruded from between its pages, a bookmark, perhaps. As she attempted to push it back into place, the book fell open in her hands. It wasn't a bookmark but a letter, written in the same elegant female hand she had glimpsed on Lord Arlington's desk. Before she could stop herself, her eyes caught a few lines. "The impossibility of our situation pains me daily, yet I cannot regret the hours we shared. If circumstances were different, if the world were kinder to those who dare to love across divides." "Miss Bryce." Mrs. Hewitt's sharp voice made Juliet start. She quickly closed the book, returning it to its place with trembling hands. "What did I expressly tell you about touching his lordship's books?" "I was only adjusting it, Mrs. Hewitt." It had fallen out of place. The head housekeeper's lips thinned to a disapproving line. "Finish your work and leave. Lord Arlington will be returning shortly, and everything must be perfect." That night, Juliet couldn't sleep. The fragments of the letter kept repeating in her mind. Who was writing to Lord Arlington with such intimacy? A forbidden love, perhaps? It seemed impossible that the rigid, proper advisor to the Emperor could be involved in anything scandalous. "You're tossing like a ship in a storm," complained Eliza from the other narrow bed. "What's troubling you?" Juliet considered confiding in her friend but thought better of it. Palace servants who spread gossip about their betters seldom lasted long. Nothing. Just dreams. 3 days later, Juliet was polishing silver in the small antechamber adjoining the main dining room when Lord Arlington entered unexpectedly, deep in conversation with another nobleman. "The Emperor grows impatient, Arlington," the older man was saying. "Your position requires an appropriate marriage alliance. The Baroness Schiller's daughter would make an excellent match." "I am well aware of my duties, Lord Termon," Lord Arlington replied coldly. "But I will not be rushed into a marriage of mere convenience." "At your age, convenience may be all that's left to hope for," Lord Termon said with a dry laugh. "Unless you're still pining for that impossible attachment from your university days? That would be most unwise." Lord Arlington's face hardened. "I believe this conversation has reached its natural conclusion." Only then did both men notice Juliet, who had frozen in place, cloth and silver salver in hand. Lord Termon dismissed her with a flick of his eyes, but Lord Arlington's gaze lingered, something unreadable in his expression. "You may continue your work, Miss Bryce," he said quietly before escorting his unwelcome guest from the room. How did he remember her name? The thought preoccupied Juliet for the rest of the day. A week passed before Juliet encountered Lord Arlington again. She was arranging fresh flowers in the east drawing room when he entered, lost in thought. He seemed surprised to find her there. "Miss Bryce. I didn't realize anyone was here." "I'm nearly finished, my lord," she said, adjusting a recalcitrant lily. Instead of leaving or dismissing her, he moved to the window, gazing out at the imperial gardens. "You have a talent for arrangement," he observed, nodding toward the flowers. "Thank you, my lord." The unexpected compliment flustered her. "Were you educated beyond reading?" he asked suddenly. Juliet hesitated. "My father was the schoolmaster in our village before he fell ill. He taught me literature, some mathematics, and a little history before he passed. A fortunate upbringing for someone in service." There was no condescension in his tone, merely observation. "Yes, my lord. Though some would say it makes me ill-suited for my position. Mrs. Hewitt often suggests I think too much for a housemaid." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Thinking is rarely a disadvantage, Miss Bryce, regardless of one's station." He turned back to the window. "Do you ever consider a different life than the one circumstances have given you?" The question was so unexpected, so unlike the usual interactions between master and servant, that Juliet momentarily forgot herself. "Every day, my lord." He turned, studying her with new interest. "And what would that life be?" She shouldn't answer. It wasn't proper conversation. And yet, something in his manner invited honesty. "I would teach, like my father. Or perhaps write. I've always loved stories." "Stories," he repeated softly. "Yes, I can see that in you." He reached into his pocket, seeming to grasp something there, the ring Eliza had mentioned. But he withdrew his hand empty. "I've kept you from your duties long enough." "Yes, my lord." Juliet curtsied and gathered her flower-arranging materials. At the door, Lord Arlington spoke again. "Miss Bryce, should you ever wish for something to read, my library contains many stories. You would be welcome to borrow from it, discreetly, of course." Juliet stared at him, astonished. "That's most generous, my lord, but inappropriate?" "Perhaps." Something in his eyes challenged the rigid propriety of their world. "The offer stands, nonetheless." The next morning, Juliet found a small book placed carefully atop her neatly folded apron, Jane Eyre, by Charlotte Brontë. There was no note, no indication of who had left it, but she knew. The audacity of it made her breath catch. If Mrs. Hewitt discovered it! Yet she couldn't bring herself to return it unread. Each night, by candlelight when Eliza was asleep, she devoured pages of the forbidden novel, seeing uncomfortable parallels between Jane's situation and her own, though Lord Arlington was certainly no Mr. Rochester, and she harbored no illusions about fairy tale endings across class divides. 2 weeks later, Juliet was assigned to help prepare Lord Arlington's quarters for a special imperial visitation. The Emperor himself would be dining privately with his advisor, a signal honor reflecting Lord Arlington's growing influence. The entire household was in an uproar of preparation. While changing linens in his bedchamber, a task usually reserved for more senior staff, but many were occupied with elaborate dining preparations, Juliet accidentally knocked over a small wooden box on the bedside table. It opened as it fell, spilling several letters onto the floor. Hastily gathering them, she couldn't help but notice they were all in the same feminine handwriting she had glimpsed before. The top letter was dated recently, only a month ago. So this correspondence was ongoing, not some relic from his past as Lord Termorne had implied. As she carefully returned the letters to their box, a small velvet pouch fell from among them. It opened, and out rolled a ring, a stunning sapphire surrounded by diamonds in an antique gold setting. This must be the family ring Eliza had mentioned, the one he supposedly carried while waiting for the right woman. Why would he keep it with these mysterious letters? Footsteps in the corridor startled her. She quickly replaced everything and was straightening the counterpane when Lord Arlington himself entered. "My lord," she exclaimed, dropping into a hasty curtsy. "I didn't expect, clearly." His eyes moved from her flushed face to the bedside table, noting the slightly askew position of the wooden box. His expression hardened. "Have you been going through my personal belongings, Miss Bryce?" "No, my lord." "I mean, not intentionally. I accidentally knocked over the box while changing the linens, and I was just putting everything back." He approached the table, opening the box to confirm its contents. "Did you read any of these letters?" "No, my lord." "I would never." It was true, she hadn't read them, though not for lack of curiosity. Lord Arlington studied her face for a long moment, as if searching for deceit. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, for his posture relaxed slightly. "I believe you. Though I wonder if your curiosity didn't tempt you." Juliet lowered her eyes. "It would not be my place to pry into your lordship's private matters." "And yet," he said softly, "I suspect you are not as indifferent to matters beyond your place as propriety might dictate. Did you enjoy Jane Eyre?" The direct acknowledgement of his gift startled her into meeting his gaze. "Very much, my lord. Though I found the ending somewhat improbable." A smile touched his lips. "Because Rochester was blind and maimed? Or because you don't believe in love that transcends social boundaries?" "Both, perhaps. Life seldom arranges itself so neatly, even with initial hardships." A pragmatic viewpoint. He picked up the velvet pouch she had replaced, weighing it in his palm. "Do you know what this is?" "I believe it's a ring, my lord." "My mother's ring. Tradition dictates I should offer it to my future wife." He opened the pouch, revealing the sapphire ring. "Beautiful, isn't it?" "Very, my lord." "It has been in my family for 5 generations. He studied it with an expression Juliet couldn't decipher. The Emperor expects me to present it to someone appropriate before the year's end. The imperial line requires secure alliances. I'm sure any lady would be honored to receive such a token, Juliet said carefully, wondering why he was confiding such personal matters to a housemaid. Would you? The question hung in the air between them, impossible and dangerous. My lord, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, you shouldn't jest about such things. I never jest about matters of consequence, Miss Bryce. He returned the ring to its pouch. You may finish your duties now. Confused and unsettled, Juliet completed her tasks and fled to the servants' quarters, her mind reeling. What had just transpired? Surely Lord Arlington hadn't been suggesting. No, it was impossible. She was imagining implications that weren't there. That evening, the imperial visit proceeded flawlessly. From her position helping in the kitchen, Juliet caught glimpses of the magnificence, the Emperor's arrival, the formal procession to the private dining room, the elaborate service of a 7-course meal. Lord Arlington, resplendent in full court dress with his medals and orders, performed his duties as host impeccably. Later, as she was returning clean silver to the butler's pantry, she overheard 2 footmen talking in low voices around the corner. It's decided, then. The announcement will come at the summer ball next month. Lord Arlington finally agreed to the match with Lady Caroline. The Emperor left him little choice. It's Lady Caroline or risk losing imperial favor. And no man in his position would risk that, no matter what his heart might want. Juliet should have moved on, but her feet seemed rooted to the spot. So the old rumors were true? About the scholar's daughter. Ancient history now. Though they say he's kept every letter she ever wrote him. The footmen moved away, their voices fading. Juliet stood frozen, pieces falling into place. The mysterious correspondence, Lord Termon's reference to an impossible attachment, the ring kept with the letters rather than offered to a suitable noble lady. For the next week, Juliet did everything possible to avoid encountering Lord Arlington. She switched duties with other maids, volunteered for work in the furthest wings of the palace, and kept her eyes firmly downcast whenever she was in rooms he might enter. But fate, or perhaps deliberate planning, intervened. 10 days after the Emperor's visit, Mrs. Hewitt informed Juliet that she was to attend Lord Arlington in his library that afternoon. He specifically requested you, the housekeeper said, her expression betraying her confusion at this unusual summons. See that you behave with absolute propriety. Any hint of impropriety would mean immediate dismissal. Juliet's heart pounded as she made her way to the library at the appointed time. She knocked softly on the heavy oak door. Enter, came Lord Arlington's voice. He stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, silhouetted against the late afternoon light. The library was empty save for the 2 of them, a circumstance so improper that Juliet hesitated at the threshold. Close the door, Miss Bryce. She did so, though every instinct warned against it. A servant alone with the master, behind closed doors, it was the subject of the worst kind of gossip. You've been avoiding me, he said without preamble. No, my lord, I've simply been assigned to other areas of the palace. At your request, I'm told. Juliet remained silent, unable to deny it. Lord Arlington turned from the window, his face now visible. He looked tired, the weight of some decision evident in the tension around his eyes. I've finished the arrangements for my engagement to Lady Caroline Westing. The announcement will be made at the summer ball. Congratulations, my lord, Juliet said automatically, ignoring the inexplicable twist of something like disappointment in her chest. I'm sure she'll make a most suitable countess. Suitable? He almost smiled. Yes, that's precisely what she is. Suitable, appropriate, proper, all the things one should look for in a political marriage. Juliet didn't know how to respond. Why was he telling her this? Lord Arlington moved to his desk and opened a drawer, removing the wooden box she had seen in his bedchamber. I have a task for you, Miss Bryce. One that requires discretion and literacy, both qualities you possess. My lord? These letters must be destroyed before my engagement is announced. He placed the box on the desk. I cannot bring myself to do it. Would you read them first? And then burn them? All except this one. He withdrew a single letter, newer than the others. This one I must answer before it, too, is consigned to ashes. Juliet stared at the box. My lord, I couldn't possibly. I'm not asking, Miss Bryce. I'm instructing. His tone softened. Please. There is no one else I can trust with this. She approached the desk hesitantly. May I ask who wrote them? A shadow crossed his face. Someone I knew many years ago. A scholar's daughter I met during my university days in Cambridge. Josephine Harlow. Brilliant, passionate about literature, utterly unsuitable for a man of my position and responsibilities. He touched the box gently. We parted ways when my father died and I was called back to Vienna to assume my duties. I truly believed it was finished. But she continued writing to you, Juliet guessed. Not immediately. There were years of silence. Then, 5 years ago, a letter arrived. Her father had died, leaving her in difficult circumstances. She had never married. Lord Arlington's voice grew strained. I should have ignored it. Instead, I replied. And you've been corresponding since? Yes. Foolishly, selfishly, I maintained a connection that could only bring pain to both of us. He straightened, his aristocratic mask slipping back into place. Now I must end it properly, with honor. But I find I cannot bear to read her words again, knowing what my next letter must say. Juliet felt the weight of his request. It was deeply improper, reading private correspondence between Lord Arlington and the woman he clearly loved. Yet she could see the cost it exacted from him to ask. I'll do as you ask, my lord. Thank you. The simple gratitude in his voice moved her unexpectedly. You may use my private study. No one will disturb you there. When you've finished, burn all but the most recent in the fireplace. I'll return in 2 hours. He left her alone with the box of letters, a strange, intimate trust that both honored and unsettled her. In Lord Arlington's private study, Juliet carefully opened the box. The letters were arranged chronologically, the paper of the earliest ones yellowed with age. She began reading, feeling like an intruder into a private world. The first letters were from their university days, passionate declarations from a young Josephine to Arlington, then simply Mr. Montclair, not yet elevated to his current title. His position as the son of an imperial adviser had been known, but the full weight of his responsibilities had not yet descended upon him. The letters spoke of shared books, heated debates about poetry, walks along the River Cam, and gradually, inevitably, love. Then came the letter that changed everything, the news of his father's death, his required return to Vienna. Josephine's response was heartbreaking, understanding, releasing him from any promises, sacrificing her happiness for his duty. Years passed between that letter and the next. When correspondence resumed, Josephine's circumstances had changed dramatically. Her father's death had left her nearly destitute. She had taken a position as a companion to an elderly baroness, the only employment her education qualified her for. Her letters never asked for assistance, never demanded anything. They simply reconnected two souls who had one. My dearest A, the news of your impending engagement has reached even this remote corner of existence. Lady Caroline is, by all accounts, everything proper society could wish for you. I pray she may also bring you some measure of the happiness you deserve. I write now not to dissuade you from your duty, I would never ask that, but to make one request. The ring you once showed me, your mother's sapphire that you said reminded you of my eyes, I beg you not to offer it to her. Keep it, sell it, cast it into the Danube, but do not place on another's hand what you once said belonged only on mine. This will be my final letter. The Baroness has passed, leaving me a small annuity, enough to secure modest independence. I am relocating to Italy, where the climate may improve my health and the distance may finally allow me to forget what might have been. With eternal affection, J. Tears blurred Juliet's vision as she finished the letter. Now she understood why Lord Arlington kept the ring with these letters. It was a token of his true love, one he couldn't bear to give to the woman imperial duty demanded he marry. She had just replaced the letters in the box, preparing to burn all but the last as instructed, when the study door opened. Lord Arlington entered, his face drawn. "Have you finished?" he asked. "Yes, my lord." Juliet stood, wiping away a tear she couldn't hide. "I was about to destroy them as you asked." He noticed her emotional state and his expression softened. "They affected you." "They're beautiful," she admitted. "The love between you and Miss Harlowe, it's rare and precious. To sacrifice it for duty seems—" She stopped, realizing she was overstepping. "Seems what, Miss Bryce?" he prompted gently. "Unnecessary," she finished in a whisper. "There must be a way to fulfill your duty to the Empire without denying your heart's truth." Lord Arlington gave a sad smile. "You speak like a character from one of your novels, Miss Bryce. Real life offers fewer happy endings." "Perhaps," Juliet agreed, "but it doesn't have to offer none at all." She gathered her courage. "Miss Harlowe is relocating to Italy. She still loves you. Surely there's a way." "There isn't." His tone was final. "Lady Caroline comes from one of the oldest families in the Empire. Our marriage will strengthen alliances the Emperor considers essential. Personal feelings are irrelevant." Juliet felt a flash of unexpected anger on behalf of both Lord Arlington and the woman who loved him. Then why keep her letters all these years? Why not burn them long ago? Something dangerous flickered in his eyes, a warning that she had gone too far. "That will be all, Miss Bryce. You may leave the letters. I'll dispose of them myself." "As you wish, my lord." She curtsied stiffly and moved toward the door. "Miss Bryce." His voice stopped her. "Thank you for your candor. It's a quality rarely encountered in these halls." She turned back, finding him standing closer than she'd expected. "I apologize if I spoke out of turn, my lord." "You did." "Completely." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was refreshing. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the distance between their stations momentarily suspended. Then Lord Arlington stepped back, the invisible wall descending once more. "Good evening, Miss Bryce." 2 days later, Juliet was summoned to Mrs. Hewitt's office. The head housekeeper's expression was grim. "Miss Bryce, items have gone missing from Lord Arlington's private study. A box of correspondence, specifically." Mrs. Hewitt's eyes bored into her. "You were the last person known to have been alone in that room." Juliet's heart stopped. "Missing? But that's impossible. Lord Arlington was disposing of those letters himself. I left them with him. His lordship says otherwise. He claims they were to be preserved, not destroyed, and that he left them in your care while he attended to other matters." That's not true. Juliet protested, then caught herself. Accusing Lord Arlington of lying would only make her situation worse. There must be some misunderstanding. Indeed. Mrs. Hewitt's tone made it clear where she believed the misunderstanding lay. Lord Arlington has requested you attend him immediately to explain yourself. If his property is not recovered, the police will be summoned. Trembling with confusion and betrayal, Juliet made her way to Lord Arlington's study. Why would he claim she had taken letters he himself had wanted destroyed? It made no sense. When she entered, Lord Arlington was alone, standing by the fireplace. He dismissed the footman stationed outside with a wave, closing the door behind him. "You summoned me, my lord." Juliet's voice was stiff with suppressed anger. "Yes, Miss Bryce. I believe you have something that belongs to me." "I have nothing of yours, my lord. You know perfectly well what happened to those letters." His expression revealed nothing. "Do I? Perhaps you could enlighten me. You instructed me to read them and burn all but the most recent. When you returned, you said you would dispose of them yourself. I left them in your possession. A convenient account." He moved to the window, his back to her. "Yet the letters are gone, and you were the last person to handle them." Juliet felt cold fear spreading through her chest. If Lord Arlington persisted in this falsehood, her word against his would mean nothing. She would be dismissed without a character, possibly even arrested. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "What purpose does it serve to accuse me falsely?" He turned, his expression now troubled rather than accusatory. "Tell me, Miss Bryce, if you had those letters now, what would you do with them?" The question was so unexpected that she answered honestly without thinking. "I would return them to Miss Harlowe. They belong with her, especially if you're determined to marry Lady Caroline." Something shifted in Lord Arlington's face, relief, perhaps. "As I thought." He moved to his desk and unlocked a drawer, withdrawing the wooden box of letters. "They were never missing. I simply needed to confirm something." Juliet stared in confusion. "You tested me." "I needed to be certain of your character." He placed the box on the desk between them. "These letters represent the most private part of my life. After you read them, I realized I had placed enormous trust in someone I barely knew. I had to be sure that trust was not misplaced." Anger flared in Juliet's chest. "So you threatened my livelihood? My reputation? Do you have any idea what would happen to me if I were dismissed without a character?" "I do." He had the grace to look ashamed. "It was badly done. I apologize." "An apology doesn't erase the fear you caused." Juliet's hands trembled with uncharacteristic boldness. "Is this how you treat everyone who knows your secrets? With suspicion and manipulation?" Lord Arlington looked taken aback by her directness. "No. Only those whose opinions have inexplicably begun to matter to me." The admission hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither could safely acknowledge. "What happens now?" Juliet finally asked. "To the letters, I mean." Lord Arlington lifted the box. "That depends on you, Miss Bryce." "Me?" "Yes." He stepped closer. "I find myself at a crossroads. Duty pulls me one direction, heart another. I had resigned myself to the former until you questioned why happiness and duty must be mutually exclusive." Juliet's breath caught. "What are you saying, my lord?" "I'm saying that perhaps there's a third path. One that requires courage I'm not certain I possess." He opened the box, removing his mother's sapphire ring. "This ring has been a burden for many years. I promised once that it would only ever grace one woman's hand. Miss Harlowe's, Juliet whispered. Yes. He studied the sapphire, turning it so it caught the light. The Imperial Court expects me to offer it to Lady Caroline at the summer ball, 3 days hence. The Emperor himself will be present to witness the formal engagement. And will you? Offer it to her. Lord Arlington closed his fist around the ring. That depends on whether a certain letter reaches Italy in time. Understanding dawned slowly. You've written to Miss Harlowe. I have. Proposing an arrangement that, while unorthodox, might satisfy both duty and heart. A rare, genuine smile transformed his features. The Imperial advisor must make an appropriate match, yes. But the man behind the title might maintain a private life beyond Vienna's borders. A secret life with Miss Harlowe? Juliet felt a strange mixture of admiration for his audacity and sadness for reasons she couldn't quite name. Not secret, discreet. I would divide my time between Vienna and a villa near Florence. Italy is not so very far. His expression turned serious. But first, Josephine must agree. And the letter may not reach her in time. What will you do if it doesn't? Proceed as expected. Offer the ring to Lady Caroline. Lock away the part of myself that once dreamed of more. He replaced the ring in its box. Unless... Lord Arlington fixed her with an intense gaze. Unless someone trustworthy could deliver my message personally, ensuring it reaches Josephine before the ball. Juliet's eyes widened. You want me to go to Italy? Yes. Tonight. There's a train to Trieste at midnight, then a steamer to Venice. He moved to his desk, retrieving an envelope. Her address is enclosed, along with funds for your journey. More than enough to return to Vienna, or to start anew elsewhere, should you choose. The implication was clear. He was offering her freedom along with this mission. Why me? Juliet asked. You barely know me. Don't I? His smile was gentle. I know you love stories but don't believe in fairy tales. I know you value truth over comfort. I know you see people for who they are, not the titles they bear. He hesitated. And I suspect you understand something about loving across boundaries. The perception in his words stilled her. Did he somehow sense her confused feelings, the inexplicable connection she'd felt to him despite all reason? Will you do this, Juliet? The use of her given name, without title or formality, emphasized the unusual nature of his request. Will you help me reach her? The proper answer would be no. It was inappropriate, dangerous even. Yet the chance to be part of this love story, to help it find its resolution, called to the romantic in her heart. Yes, she said simply. I'll go. Lord Arlington's relief was palpable. Thank you. He handed her the envelope. A carriage will be waiting at the servants' entrance at 11. Tell no one where you're going. As Juliet took the envelope, their fingers brushed. For a moment, something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of a connection that might, in another world, have been something more. I hope you find your happiness, my lord, she said softly. As do I, Miss Bryce. He stepped back, formal once more. For both of us. The journey to Italy was unlike anything Juliet had ever experienced. First-class accommodations on the train, a private cabin on the steamer, carriages waiting at each stop. Lord Arlington had spared no expense to ensure her swift and comfortable passage. The contrast with her life as a housemaid was disorienting. Venice took her breath away, the graceful canals, the ancient buildings glowing golden in the sunlight, the sense of history in every stone. From there, another train carried her into the Tuscan countryside, where rolling hills covered with vineyards and olive groves stretched to the horizon. Miss Harlowe had taken a small villa outside Florence, in a village nestled among the hills. When Juliet arrived, the afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the narrow streets. She found the address easily, a modest but charming house with a garden of roses and herbs. Her knock was answered by a woman in her early 40s, still beautiful despite the lines care had etched around her eyes. Her dark hair was streaked with premature silver, and her blue eyes, the color of Lord Arlington's sapphire, Juliet noted, held a wariness that came from disappointment. "Miss Josephine Harlowe?" Juliet asked. "Yes." The woman studied her with curiosity. "How may I help you?" "My name is Juliet Bryce. I've come from Vienna, from Lord Arlington, Montclair. I have a letter for you." Josephine's composure faltered for just a moment. "Arlington sent you? All this way for a letter?" She recovered quickly, her innate dignity reasserting itself. "Please, come in." The interior of the villa was simple but refined, filled with books and small treasures that spoke of a life dedicated to intellectual pursuits rather than material wealth. Josephine led her to a small sitting room overlooking the garden. "How is he?" she asked quietly after offering Juliet refreshment. "Torn," Juliet answered honestly. "Between duty and heart." Josephine nodded sadly. "A familiar battle. One duty has always won." She took the letter Juliet offered, her fingers trembling slightly. "Yet he sent you personally, rather than trusting to post. That suggests urgency. The summer ball is tomorrow evening. He's expected to announce his engagement to Lady Caroline." Understanding dawned in Josephine's eyes. "Ah. A final farewell before he places my rival's hand in the crook of his arm." She gazed at the letter. "I'm not certain I have the courage to read it." "It's not a farewell," Juliet said, perhaps overstepping. "It's a different path. One he hopes you'll consider." Hope and wariness warred in Josephine's expression. "You've read it?" "No, but I know its purpose." He shared the outline with me. Josephine studied her curiously. "You're more than a messenger, then?" "He trusts you." "I'm a housemaid in the Imperial Palace," Juliet explained. "I became involved by accident. I read your earlier letters, with his permission." Rather than being offended, Josephine seemed intrigued. "And what did you think of our correspondence?" "I thought it was beautiful," Juliet admitted. "And tragic that two people who so clearly belong together should be kept apart by circumstance." Josephine's smile was sad. "Youth always favors romance over practicality. Sometimes practicality can accommodate romance, with sufficient determination," Juliet countered gently. This earned her a considering look. "You're an unusual housemaid, Miss Bryce." "So I've been told." Josephine turned her attention to the letter, breaking the seal with careful fingers. As she read, her expression transformed, from resignation to disbelief, then to cautious joy. "He can't be serious," she whispered. "After all these years?" "He is," Juliet confirmed. "The question is whether you still feel the same." Josephine looked up, tears gathering in her eyes. 20 years I've loved him. 20 years of letters and memories and mitre-bins." She touched the pages reverently. "And now he proposes a life divided between duty and love, between Vienna and Florence." "It would be unorthodox," Juliet acknowledged. "It would be miraculous." Josephine stood, moving to the window. "But can I truly ask him to live such a divided existence? To maintain the facade of a political marriage while his heart resides elsewhere?" Lady Caroline is aware of the arrangement, Juliet explained, recalling what Lord Arlington had told her. She seeks the status of the match more than romantic attachment. She has her own understanding with someone inappropriate for her position. Josephine's eyebrows rose. How very modern. And yet, he requires your answer before tomorrow evening, Juliet reminded her gently. If you decline, he will honor his duty to the Empire and offer Lady Caroline his mother's ring. At the mention of the ring, Josephine's hand went to her throat. The sapphire. He still has it. Yes. He keeps it with your letters. A tear slipped down Josephine's cheek. All these years? Will you return with me to Vienna? Juliet asked. He's arranged everything. A private train compartment leaves Florence at midnight. Josephine turned from the window, resolution firming her features. Yes. Though not to interrupt the ball or create a scandal. I would never jeopardize his position. She touched the letter. But I need to see him, to ensure this is truly what he wants and not some desperate impulse before surrendering to duty forever. I'll wait while you prepare, Juliet offered. As Josephine left to pack a small travelling case, Juliet gazed around the villa, noting the scholarly touch in every corner, the well-worn books, the writing desk positioned to capture the best light, the absence of frivolous ornaments. It was the home of a woman of substance and intellect, one who had built a life of meaning despite heartbreak. The journey back to Vienna was filled with quiet conversation. Josephine proved to be everything her letters had suggested, brilliant, passionate about literature, possessed of a dry wit that years of disappointment had tempered but not extinguished. She asked Juliet about her background, her aspirations beyond service, listening with genuine interest. You remind me of myself at your age, Josephine said as their train approached Vienna. Too intelligent for the path life has set before you, too practical to indulge in hopeless dreams. I don't know what path lies before me now, Juliet admitted. Lord Arlington included enough funds for me to start anew elsewhere, as he put it. Will you? Leave service? Juliet considered the question. Perhaps. Though I have no family, no connections. Freedom without purpose seems untethered. Purpose can be cultivated, Josephine said thoughtfully. And connections formed. She hesitated, then added, should Arlington and I establish our unconventional arrangement, I may need a companion for the villa, someone literate, discreet, with an appreciation for literature. The offer hung in the air, tentative, dependent on too many variables to be certain, but genuine nonetheless. That's most generous, Juliet said carefully. Though perhaps premature. Let's see what the evening brings. They arrived in Vienna with barely 2 hours before the summer ball was scheduled to begin. A carriage was waiting at the station as arranged, taking them not to the palace but to a small private residence Lord Arlington maintained in the city. A butler admitted them, leading them to a drawing room where Lord Arlington paced anxiously. When he saw Josephine, he froze, emotions too complex for words transforming his features. You came, he said simply. Did you doubt I would? Josephine's voice was steady, though her hands trembled. Always. I've never been certain I deserved such loyalty. The two stood gazing at each other, 20 years of separation and longing concentrated in a single moment. Juliet felt like an intruder and moved toward the door. Stay, Miss Bryce, Lord Arlington said without looking away from Josephine. You've earned the right to witness the conclusion of the story you helped write. Arlington, Josephine said softly, are you certain? This arrangement you propose, it asks so much of everyone involved. I've never been more certain of anything. He closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. For 20 years I've tried to be the man duty demanded. I've served the Empire faithfully, sacrificed personal happiness for imperial stability. His voice grew fierce. I will continue to do so, but not at the cost of losing you again. And Lady Caroline? She truly understands what her role would be. She seeks the position, not the man. Her heart lies elsewhere, as does mine. He touched Josephine's face with reverent fingers. We would maintain all propriety in public. But my private life, my true life, would be with you, whether here or in Florence. Josephine leaned into his touch. It sounds like something from a novel, too beautiful to be believed. Yet real. He withdrew his mother's ring from his pocket. This has only ever belonged to you, in my heart. I won't offer it to Caroline tonight or ever. He held it out. Will you accept it now, after all these years? Josephine's eyes filled with tears. Yes, she whispered. Though I can't wear it publicly, on a chain, close to your heart, he suggested. As you have been close to mine, always. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, temporarily, a symbolic gesture before it would be transferred to a chain around her neck, Juliet felt tears on her own cheeks. It was a beautiful moment, bittersweet in its compromises but triumphant in its defiance of a world that would deny such love. I must go soon, Lord Arlington said reluctantly. The ball, I know. Josephine touched the ring, already beginning to remove it for safekeeping. Go. Do what must be done. Know that I'll be waiting, today, tomorrow, always. He kissed her then, a gesture of such tenderness that Juliet had to look away. When she glanced back, Lord Arlington was composing himself, resuming the mantle of imperial adviser. Miss Bryce, he said, turning to her. I cannot adequately express my gratitude for what you've done. No gratitude is necessary, my lord. It was an honor to help. Nevertheless, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small envelope. Your future should reflect your worth. This letter of recommendation, along with the funds you already hold, should open many doors. Juliet accepted the envelope, touched by his thoughtfulness even at such a momentous time in his own life. And should you wish it, Josephine added, my offer stands. The villa would benefit from your presence, whenever you decide. Lord Arlington looked between them, pleased. You discussed this. Briefly, Josephine confirmed. Miss Bryce has qualities one rarely finds, intelligence, discretion, and a romantic heart tempered by practical sense. Indeed she does. Lord Arlington's smile held genuine warmth. Consider carefully, Miss Bryce. Life offers few second chances. I, of all people, know this well. He checked his pocket watch reluctantly. I must go. With a final, private look at Josephine, he departed for the summer ball, where he would publicly pledge himself to one woman while his heart remained with another. In the quiet that followed his departure, Josephine turned to Juliet. What will you do now? Juliet considered the paths before her. Return to service at the palace, where she would always be the housemaid who knew too much. Use Lord Arlington's recommendation to seek a more elevated position elsewhere. Or accept Josephine's offer of a new life in Florence, surrounded by books and beauty. I think, she said slowly, that I would like to see those Tuscan hills again. Josephine's smile was radiant. I hoped you might say that. 3 months later, Juliet sat in the garden of Josephine's Florentine villa, a stack of books beside her and a half-written letter on her lap. The autumn sunshine warmed the terrace, glinting off the sapphire ring Josephine now wore openly on her hand when in Italy. Lord Arlington's arrangement had proceeded as planned. He had announced his engagement to Lady Caroline at the summer ball, though no ring had been presented. Their marriage, scheduled for spring, would satisfy imperial expectations while allowing discreet accommodations for the heart's true desires. Already, he had made 2 extended visits to Florence, periods where Juliet tactfully found reasons to explore the surrounding countryside, giving the reunited lovers their privacy. Her own life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. No longer a housemaid but a companion and, increasingly, a friend to Josephine, she spent her days reading, writing, and occasionally teaching English to the children of neighboring families. The letter on her lap was to Mrs. Hewitt, formally resigning her position at the palace and thanking her for her guidance, a courtesy Juliet felt was important, even months after her abrupt departure. Dreaming again. Josephine's voice interrupted her thoughts. Juliet looked up with a smile. Reflecting, rather, on how stories sometimes find their way to unexpected endings. Not endings, Josephine corrected, sitting beside her. Continuations. She glanced at the unfinished letter, still struggling with the right words. A bit. It's difficult to explain my absence without revealing truths that aren't mine to share. Simply tell her you found a position that better suits your abilities and education. It's true enough. Juliet nodded. I suppose that's all anyone really needs to know. They sat in companionable silence, enjoying the beauty of the garden. Juliet had grown fond of this quiet life, filled with books and meaningful conversation. Yet sometimes she found herself remembering the intensity in Lord Arlington's eyes when he'd spoken of duty and heart, the way he'd remembered her name when most nobility barely saw servants as people worthy of notice. You're thinking of him again, Josephine observed with gentle perception. Juliet flushed. I don't know what you mean. Arlington. You get a particular expression when he crosses your mind. Josephine's tone held no accusation, only understanding. It's natural, you know. He has a way of seeing people, truly seeing them, that's rare in men of his position. It's part of what I've always loved about him. I admire him, Juliet admitted carefully. His courage in finding a way to honor both duty and heart. And perhaps something more. Josephine suggested. You needn't deny it on my account. The heart is complex enough to hold many forms of love simultaneously. Juliet's blush deepened. Even if there were feelings, they would be inappropriate and unrequited. I'm not so lost in novels that I can't recognize reality. Josephine smiled sadly. Reality has a way of surprising us. 20 years I waited, certain my love was a closed chapter, and now look. She touched her ring. Don't close doors before they've even opened, Juliet. Life is too short for such certainties. Before Juliet could respond, the villa's housekeeper appeared at the garden door. Signora, a telegram has arrived for Miss Bryce. Curious, Juliet accepted the telegram. Opening it, she found a brief message that made her breath catch. Miss Bryce, stop, your presence requested, Vienna Palace immediately. Stop, matter of great urgency. Stop, Arlington, what is it? Josephine asked, noting her expression. Juliet handed her the telegram, confusion clouding her thoughts. Lord Arlington wants me back in Vienna. Immediately. Josephine read the message, her brow furrowing. How strange. He's not due to visit Florence for another month. She looked up, concern in her eyes. You don't think something has happened to change his arrangement with Caroline? I don't know. Juliet stood, suddenly restless. But I should go, it must be important for him to summon me directly. Of course. Josephine rose as well. I'll have Maria help you pack. The evening train to Vienna leaves at 8. 2 days later, Juliet found herself once again entering the imperial palace, this time through the main entrance rather than the servants' door. Lord Arlington's telegram had included instructions to present herself as a guest rather than a returning servant, which had caused considerable confusion among the footmen. She was escorted to a small anteroom and asked to wait. The opulence surrounding her felt foreign now after months in the simpler elegance of Josephine's villa. The rigid formality of the palace staff reminded her of a life she had happily left behind. The door opened, and Lord Arlington entered. He looked tired but pleased to see her. "Miss Bryce. Thank you for coming so promptly." Juliet curtsied from habit. "Your telegram suggested urgency, my lord." "Indeed." He gestured for her to sit, taking a chair opposite her rather than retreating behind the authority of a desk. "I apologize for the dramatic summons, but I needed to speak with you directly. Is everything all right? Your arrangement with Lady Caroline is proceeding as planned." He smiled slightly. "Though she sends her regards. She's quite curious about the housemaid who helped orchestrate our unusual circumstances." Juliet relaxed somewhat. "Then why am I here, my lord?" Lord Arlington leaned forward, his expression intent. "Because I need your help once more, Miss Bryce. In a matter even more delicate than the last." "I don't understand." He withdrew a folded newspaper from his coat and handed it to her. It was a society page from one of Vienna's prominent papers, featuring an article about the upcoming imperial wedding. But it was a small paragraph near the bottom that he indicated with his finger. Sources close to the palace suggest Lord Arlington's recent travels to Italy may involve more than diplomatic affairs. A certain villa outside Florence, occupied by a scholarly English lady, has received the advisor's extended visits on multiple occasions. One must wonder if the imperial court is aware of these frequent journeys, or their true purpose. Juliet's blood ran cold. "Someone knows." "Yes. And they're threatening to expose everything." Lord Arlington's voice was tight with controlled anger. "If this reaches the Emperor, your position would be at risk," Juliet finished. "And Lady Caroline's reputation would suffer. As would Josephine's." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of discomposure. "I can weather a scandal if necessary. But I won't have Josephine subjected to public ridicule or worse." "What can I do?" Juliet asked. "Find the source of the leak. Someone either followed me to Florence or has access to my private correspondence." His eyes were intense. "You know the palace. You understand how information flows among the staff. And no one would suspect you of investigating on my behalf. You want me to return to service?" Juliet considered the request. It meant delaying her return to the peaceful life she had begun building in Florence. Yet she couldn't refuse, not when Josephine's happiness and Lord Arlington's position hung in the balance. "I'll do it," she said firmly. "But I'll need access to your correspondence, your appointments, your visitors' lists. Everything that might reveal who knows about Florence. You shall have it all." Relief softened his features. "Thank you, Juliet. I knew I could trust you." The use of her given name sent an unexpected warmth through her. "I'll need to send a telegram to Miss Harlow, explaining my delay." "Already done." He stood, businesslike once more. "Your quarters have been prepared in the administrative wing, near my offices. You'll begin tomorrow morning." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Juliet, now installed as Lord Arlington's temporary secretary, found herself at the center of palace operations. Her position gave her access to information that would have been unimaginable during her time as a housemaid. She reviewed correspondence, scheduled meetings, and most importantly, observed everyone who interacted with Lord Arlington. The palace staff regarded her new position with a mixture of resentment and curiosity. Former colleagues now had to address her with deference, creating an awkwardness she hadn't anticipated. Only Eliza treated her the same, greeting her with a warm hug and boundless questions about her mysterious departure and even more mysterious return. "There's talk below stairs," Eliza whispered during a rare private moment in the garden. "About his lordship's frequent trips to Italy. And your own sudden elevation after returning from the same region." Juliet kept her expression neutral. Palace gossip is rarely accurate. "Perhaps." Eliza studied her shrewdly. "But it's often based on something real." "Be careful, Juliet. Lord Arlington is engaged to be married, whatever other arrangements he might have." "I'm simply doing my job," Juliet replied, perhaps too quickly. "Nothing more." Eliza's skeptical expression suggested she believed otherwise, but she didn't press further. As the days passed, Juliet gradually narrowed her list of suspects. The leak had to come from someone with access to Lord Arlington's travel arrangements and private correspondence. That limited the possibilities considerably. She was reviewing the duty rosters late one evening when Lord Arlington entered the office unexpectedly. She had grown accustomed to his presence during working hours, but nights were usually her time to investigate undisturbed. "Still at work, Miss Bryce?" he asked, loosening his formal cravat. He had clearly come from some evening function, still dressed in his finest attire. "I've been comparing the staff schedules against your travel dates," she explained. "Trying to identify who might have had opportunity to access your private papers." He moved to stand behind her chair, examining the documents spread across the desk. His proximity made her heart beat faster, a reaction she sternly suppressed. "Any progress?" he asked. "Some. I've eliminated most of the household staff. It must be someone closer to your personal sphere." Lord Arlington sighed. "I feared as much." He moved to the sideboard, pouring himself a small measure of brandy. After a moment's hesitation, he poured a second glass and offered it to her. The gesture, treating her as an equal rather than a subordinate, touched her. "Thank you, my lord." "Arlington," he corrected quietly. "At this hour, after all we've been through, I think we can dispense with formalities." Juliet accepted the glass, careful that their fingers didn't touch. "That would be improper." A smile touched his lips. "Propriety seems a flexible concept in our acquaintance, wouldn't you say? You've read my love letters, transported my intended across international borders, and now investigate conspiracies on my behalf. I think we're well beyond the bounds of conventional protocol. Put that way, it did seem absurd to maintain rigid formalities." "Very well. Arlington." His name felt strange on her tongue, intimate in a way that both thrilled and alarmed her. He took the chair opposite hers, his posture relaxing. In these private moments, the weight of his position seemed to lift somewhat, revealing the man beneath the advisor's mantle. "How is Josephine?" he asked. "Your letters to her pass through my diplomatic pouch for security, but I don't read them." "She's well. Concerned about you, naturally." "About this situation." Juliet hesitated, then added, "She misses you." A shadow crossed his face. "As I miss her." "This separation is difficult, though necessary. The wedding is still proceeding as planned." "Yes. In 3 months' time I will stand before the Emperor and pledge myself to Lady Caroline." He took a long sip of brandy. "While my heart remains in Florence." The sadness in his voice moved her. "It's a heavy price for love. One I pay willingly." His eyes met hers. "Some connections transcend conventional understanding, don't they? They demand sacrifices that others might find incomprehensible." Something in his tone, in the way he looked at her, suggested he might not be speaking solely of Josephine. Juliet lowered her gaze to her glass, uncomfortable with the direction of her thoughts. "I should continue my work," she said softly. "The sooner we identify the source of the leak, the sooner you can safely return to Florence." Arlington nodded, finishing his brandy in a single swallow. "Of course. Don't stay too late, Juliet. Even dedicated secretaries need rest." After he left, Juliet remained motionless, trying to calm her racing heart. The way he had said her name, with warmth, with familiarity, awakened feelings she had been determinedly suppressing. Feelings that were inappropriate, impossible, and utterly irrelevant to the task at hand. "Focus," she whispered to herself, returning to the papers before her. The breakthrough came 3 days later. Juliet had been reviewing the palace mail room records, tracing which staff members handled diplomatic pouches and private correspondence. One name appeared with suspicious consistency: Thomas Weldon, Lord Termont's personal secretary. Lord Termont, the same nobleman who had pressured Arlington about marriage months ago, who had hinted at knowledge of his impossible attachment. If his secretary had been intercepting or copying Arlington's private letters. Juliet immediately sought out Lord Arlington, finding him in conference with several ministers. She waited discreetly until the meeting concluded, then approached as the others filed out. "I believe I've found our source," she said quietly, placing the mail room records before him. Arlington reviewed them quickly, his expression hardening as he reached the same conclusion she had. "Termont. I should have known." He looked up at her, admiration clear in his eyes. "Excellent work, Juliet." "What will you do?" she asked. "Confront him." "Privately." Arlington's tone was grim. "Termont has his own secrets, ones the Emperor would find far more disturbing than my arrangement with Josephine." "You'll blackmail him." Juliet was surprised by the ruthless strategy. "I prefer to think of it as mutual assured destruction." He smiled without humor. "Politics is rarely clean, Juliet. Even love must sometimes employ its methods." That evening, Lord Arlington met with Lord Termont in his private study. Juliet, stationed in the adjoining office with the connecting door slightly ajar, could hear their conversation, a deliberate arrangement to ensure she had all the information necessary to complete her task. "You've been busy, Termont," Arlington said coldly. "Intercepting my correspondence, tracking my movements, planting stories in the press." "I'm sure I don't know what you mean," Lord Termont replied, though his tone lacked conviction. "Let's not waste time with denials. Your secretary, Weldon, has been examining my private communications for months. My commitment to the Emperor has never wavered," Arlington countered. "My private affairs remain private. For now." The threat in Termont's voice was unmistakable. "But the Emperor has ears everywhere. It would be unfortunate if certain details reached him before your advantageous marriage to Lady Caroline could secure your position." "It would indeed be unfortunate," Arlington agreed, his tone shifting to something more dangerous. "Almost as unfortunate as if certain financial transactions between your office and the Russian diplomatic corps were to become public knowledge." A sharp intake of breath. "You're bluffing." "The Chernov account. The monthly transfers. The meetings at that discreet hunting lodge near the border." Arlington's voice was like steel. "Did you think no one was watching you, Termont, while you were so busy watching me?" Silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. "What do you want?" Termont finally asked, defeat evident in his voice. "A simple arrangement." "You forget about Florence." "I forget about Russia. We both continue to serve the Emperor with unquestioned loyalty. And your secretary, Weldon, will receive an attractive offer to serve at our embassy in America." effective immediately. Another long silence, then agreed. After Lord Tremorne departed, Arlington opened the connecting door fully, finding Juliet standing just inside. His expression was weary but triumphant. "It's done," he said. "Tremorne will ensure the press receives no further hints about Florence, and his secretary will be halfway to New York within the week." "You knew about his Russian connections all along?" Juliet asked. Arlington shrugged. "I suspected. Every man has secrets, Juliet. The higher the position, the deeper they tend to be." He moved to the window, gazing out at the Imperial Gardens below. "I've made arrangements for your return to Florence. You can leave tomorrow, if you wish." The news should have brought only relief, yet Juliet felt an unexpected pang at the thought of leaving. "So soon?" He turned back to her, something unreadable in his expression. "Unless you have reason to stay." The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibilities neither should acknowledge. "No," Juliet said finally. "Miss Harlow will be pleased to have me back." "And you'll be able to visit again soon, safely?" "Yes." He nodded, his aristocratic mask sliding back into place. "The crisis is resolved, thanks to your exceptional work. Josephine was right about you." "Right." "She said you had the mind of a detective and the heart of a poet. A rare combination." He smiled slightly. "She also suggested I might find your company compelling." Juliet felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Miss Harlow is too generous in her assessment." "On the contrary." Arlington took a step toward her, then seemed to think better of it, stopping himself. "She sees clearly, as she always has." An awkward silence fell between them. Juliet knew she should leave, should begin preparing for her journey back to Florence. Yet her feet remained rooted to the spot, her heart beating too fast. "I should go," she finally managed. "There are arrangements to make for tomorrow." "Of course." Arlington moved behind his desk, creating a physical barrier between them, deliberate, she thought. "My carriage will take you to the station. And I've taken the liberty of increasing your stipend in recognition of your service." "That's not necessary." "It is." His tone brooked no argument. "Your dedication deserves acknowledgement." Juliet curtsied, falling back on formality to navigate the strange current of emotion in the room. "Thank you, my lord." "For everything." As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Juliet." She turned back, finding him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "When I visit Florence next month, would you consider being present? Rather than finding reasons to be elsewhere, as you have previously." The request surprised her. "I thought you would prefer privacy with Miss Harlow." "There are many hours in a day," he said carefully. "Josephine has suggested that we three might find enjoyable conversation together. If you were willing." Juliet understood the delicate balance being proposed. Not an intrusion on his time with Josephine, but an acknowledgement of her own place in their unusual arrangement. A place that had evolved beyond mere employee or messenger. "I would like that," she said softly. His smile was genuine. "As would I." The journey back to Florence felt different this time, tinged with a complexity of emotion Juliet wasn't entirely ready to examine. Relief at returning to the peace of the Villa ward with a curious reluctance to leave Vienna, to leave him. Josephine welcomed her back with warm embraces and eager questions about the resolution of the crisis. When Juliet explained how Lord Tremorne had been behind the leaks and how Arlington had managed to neutralize the threat, Josephine listened with a mixture of concern and admiration. "He's always been brilliant at such maneuvers," she said, pouring them both tea in the garden. It was their favorite spot for conversations. Even at university, he could outthink everyone around him. It's what makes him so valuable to the emperor. And to you, Juliet added. Josephine smiled. Yes, to me as well. She studied Juliet over her teacup. He mentioned in his last letter that he invited you to be present during his next visit. If that's acceptable to you, Juliet hastened to say. I wouldn't want to intrude on your time together. Intrude? Josephine laughed softly. My dear Juliet, you've become essential to this unusual arrangement of ours. Without you, Arlington and I might never have reconnected. I only delivered a letter. You did far more than that. You showed him a possibility he hadn't considered, that duty and heart could coexist with sufficient courage and creativity. She set down her cup. And in doing so, you became part of our story. I'm not sure what that means, Juliet admitted. Josephine's expression grew thoughtful. Neither am I, precisely. But I believe we'll discover it together. She reached across the table, squeezing Juliet's hand. Arlington sees in you what I see, a kindred spirit. Someone who understands that love doesn't always follow conventional paths. The month passed quickly, filled with the peaceful routines of the villa. Juliet found herself watching the calendar, anticipating Arlington's visit with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. When he finally arrived, the dynamic between the three of them shifted in subtle ways. Meals became occasions for lively intellectual discussion, with Juliet finding herself an equal participant rather than an observer. Afternoons might find them all reading in the garden, sharing passages that moved them. Evenings brought music or games of chess, with alliances forming and reforming among them. And if sometimes Juliet caught Arlington watching her with an expression that mirrored her own confused feelings, or if Josephine's knowing glances suggested she understood more than was spoken aloud, well, that was part of their unusual arrangement too. On the final evening of his visit, after Josephine had retired early with a headache, Juliet found herself alone with Arlington in the villa's small library. Rain tapped gently against the windows, creating a cocoon of intimacy around them. I leave for Vienna tomorrow, he said, closing the book he had been pretending to read. The wedding preparations have entered their final phase. Are you nervous? Juliet asked, setting aside her own volume. About the ceremony? No. About maintaining this balance between duty and heart? Constantly. He smiled ruefully. Yet it seems to be working, doesn't it? This arrangement of ours. It does. She hesitated, then added, though I still wonder about Lady Caroline. How she truly feels about it all. She has her own version of this arrangement, Arlington explained. A childhood friend, the daughter of a merchant, unsuitable for someone of Caroline's position. They maintain a discreet connection, much as Josephine and I will. So many secrets, Juliet mused. So many lives lived in shadows. Not shadows, he corrected gently. Just separate chambers of the heart. Each real, each valuable. She met his gaze, finding something there that both thrilled and frightened her. And is there room in this arrangement for new chambers to develop? The question was dangerously direct. Arlington's breath caught audibly. Josephine believes there might be, he said carefully. She has observed things. What things? Juliet's heart pounded so loudly she was certain he must hear it. A connection. Between you and me. He stood, moving to the window, putting distance between them. One I've tried to ignore out of loyalty to her. And she says love is not diminished by being shared. That her heart is large enough to allow me happiness in all its forms. He turned back to her. She is extraordinary, isn't she? Yes, Juliet agreed softly. As are you. Arlington's expression was pained. I am a man divided, Juliet. Between Vienna and Florence, between duty and passion. I have no right to divide further, to ask more of either of you. Perhaps you're not asking. Perhaps it's simply happening, despite all propriety and intention. She stood as well, courage rising within her. Perhaps some connections transcend conventional understanding, as you once said. He closed his eyes briefly. If circumstances were different. They're not, she interrupted gently. This is the reality we have. Complex, unconventional, filled with limitations and possibilities alike. She took a step toward him. I don't expect anything, Arlington. I don't demand changes to your arrangements or promises you cannot keep. I simply acknowledge what exists between us, whatever name we give it. He studied her face, searching for something. Whatever he found there gave him courage to close the remaining distance between them, taking her hands in his. I never anticipated you, Juliet Bryce, he said quietly. When you spilled tea on my correspondence that first day, I saw only a nervous housemaid. How could I have known what you would become to me, to us? And what is that? She whispered. Instead of answering, he bent and kissed her, a gentle, questioning touch that asked permission even as it expressed longing. Juliet responded with a certainty that surprised them both, her hands moving to his shoulders, her heart recognizing what her mind had been reluctant to admit. When they parted, Arlington rested his forehead against hers. I must speak with Josephine. Properly, explicitly. This cannot progress without her full understanding and blessing. Of course. Juliet stepped back, already missing his warmth. Whatever happens, whatever she decides, I treasure what we have built, all three of us. Later that night, unable to sleep, Juliet stood at her bedroom window watching the rain. A soft knock drew her attention to the door. Josephine entered, still in her evening dress despite the late hour. She moved to stand beside Juliet at the window, her expression serene in the dim light. Arlington has spoken with me, she said without preamble. Juliet tensed. I never intended, I know. Josephine took her hand. Love rarely follows our intentions, Juliet. It creates its own path, often to our great surprise. You're not angry. How could I be? I've watched this connection grow between you. In some ways, I anticipated it before either of you recognized it yourselves. She smiled softly. We are creating something rare here, a family of choice, bound by understanding rather than convention. Juliet felt tears gather in her eyes. I would never wish to cause you pain. You haven't. On the contrary. Josephine squeezed her hand. I spent 20 years loving Arlington from a distance, believing happiness impossible. Now I have him, imperfectly but genuinely. Why would I deny either of you additional joy? What happens now? Juliet asked, overwhelmed by the generosity of spirit before her. We continue as we have been, but with greater honesty. Arlington will divide his time between Vienna and Florence, between duty and heart. And here, in this villa, we three will create a haven of truth amid a world of necessary pretense. Josephine touched Juliet's cheek gently. If that's what you want. Yes, Juliet whispered. More than I can say. The next morning, Arlington departed for Vienna as planned, but with new understandings established among the three of them. The future stretched before them, complex, requiring discretion and courage, but illuminated by possibilities none had dared to imagine months before. As Juliet and Josephine stood arm in arm watching his carriage disappear down the cypress-lined drive, Josephine touched the sapphire ring she wore openly in the privacy of their shared home. He refused to give this ring to anyone but me, she said thoughtfully, even when duty demanded it. He kept it with my letters, a token of what his heart truly wanted. A beautiful symbol of your connection, Juliet agreed. Josephine smiled, her eyes knowing. Yes. And perhaps someday, there will be other symbols for other connections. She turned toward the villa. Come, let's go inside. We have letters to write, and a future to plan. As they walked back together, Juliet reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here, from nervous housemaid to beloved companion, from observer of a love story to participant in something even more remarkable. All because of a box of letters she had been asked to read, and a ring that had found its rightful home after 20 years of waiting. Some connections, she now understood, were worth every sacrifice, every compromise, every challenge society might place in their path. In this Tuscan villa, 3 souls had found a truth larger than convention, that love, in all its forms, creates its own legitimacy, its own rightness, its own family. And that was a story worth living, page by unfolding page.